Thank you. Hello, everyone. I appreciate you coming. My name is Jeff Pompeo. I'm the president of Caretaker Medical. We are a commercial phase wireless patient monitoring company that is democratizing non-invasive continuous beat-by-beat blood pressure and hemodynamics across all points of care. In fact, I'm wearing our device right now, and if you look, I'm going to set this here. If you look closely, as I begin to calm down and get rid of the nervousness, you should see my blood pressure and my cardiac output start to come back down into normal. So let's talk about the hospitals today, right? No surprise to anyone in this room. There's a push-pull effect going on that affects all clinicians, and in particular, nurses and first-line caregivers. The push is patient populations are getting bigger and sicker, and larger and older. Hospitals are understaffed. I read a survey recently that said since COVID, 22% of nurses have left the profession. So there's a staffing shortage that's very real, and nurses are overburdened, particularly with the frontline caregiving and manual data collection and vital sign giving. There's a pull function that's happening also, right? And that's around monitoring blind spots, where between intermittent spot check readings, nurses and clinicians don't know what's going on hemodynamically with the patient. Maybe they're deteriorating, maybe they're not. And in the manual spot checks leave these blind spots that just nurses cannot make good decisions. And we all know that earlier interventions lead to better outcomes. Hospital is demanding lower costs, cost reductions, and better workflows to help these overburdened nurses and better outcomes. And then, of course, there's more stress on the nurses ever before, especially around AI, more data collection. So the problem is, if we just dig into the patient monitoring aspect, is nurses really only have, and clinicians really only have two choices to monitor patients: invasive and continuous, or non-invasive and non-continuous. On the non-invasive and intermittent side, this is where these dangerous blind spots appear. We've all had the blood pressure cuff on. We've all had even automatic blood pressure cuffs. It inflates every X minutes. But what happens between those inflations is the danger zone where bad things happen, bad events happen, costly events happen, and even deaths. The other alternative for higher risk patients that need more than spot check measurements is invasive. You can get continuous beat-by-beat blood pressure monitoring and continuous hemodynamics like cardiac output and stroke volume, and the gold standard is an invasive catheter that you see here on the left side of the screen. But the problem with that is it's costly to put in, it's time-consuming, it has dwell-time infection risks, nurses have to come level the A-line periodically, and so because of those issues, it's really only relegated to the ICU and the OR. In fact, in most hospitals, you can't leave the ICU to a lower cost bed until you get rid of these A-lines and take them out of the patient. So what if there was a better way? What if there was a way to get non-invasive and continuous beat-by-beat blood pressure, cardiac output, and stroke volume? A quick illustration with this middle shows you. These blue dots are this upper arm cuff inflating every 15 minutes. And you can see stable, stable, crash. As opposed to the A line showing in the black line beat by beat. Look at the volatility of this person's blood pressure between each beat. And the big issue is, notice the decline happens, right? For 10 minutes, this patient was one of the 9% of anesthetized patients that doesn't come out of an anesthesia in a positive way. And she languished in the danger zone. That's a mean arterial pressure below 65, where guess what's happening in this 10 minutes? AKI, acute kidney injury, perfusion issues, poor blood flow, oxygen to the brain, parts of her dying, and the problem is no one knows. So let's talk about our solution. This is called the Vital Stream. This does the equivalent of a beat-by-beat blood pressure, cardiac output, and stroke volume, just like an A-line or Swan-Ganz catheter does, but it does it in a completely wire-free, up and running in 1 minute, disposable finger cuff. So nurses can put this on, push go, 60 seconds later, they're monitoring continuous blood. That's a blood pressure reading every time the heart beats. You think your blood pressure is 120/80, and it might be right now. Now it's not anymore, because you're designed to constantly be changing, and your baroreceptors are constricting and inflating your vessels so that you moderate your blood pressure so that you don't faint. So from this, we're able to collect all that data and then send it wirelessly to either our companion app that can be in the room or at the nurse's station, our central station sitting at the nurse's station in the ICU, or our cloud portal for hospital at home or remote patient monitoring, or as an interconnect to Philips and GE and capsule monitors that can then go on to the EMR. We have standard reports that get pushed into the patient's record that automate the data collection that nurses have to manually do and get the EMR data so that billing and reimbursement can happen in real time. So here's all the things we measure. It's a complete wireless platform. It's built around pulse decomposition analysis, which is our patented technique for measuring non-invasively all these hemodynamics like continuous blood pressure, cardiac output, stroke volume. But as a wireless platform, it's also a wearable Bluetooth medical hub. So we've integrated other wireless sensors into our platform. Wireless ECG, wireless pulse oximetry, a wireless end-tidal. Those all come into the platform, get combined into our standard reports, and then pushed to the patient's EMR. We also have an early warning system, which is the whole point here. Early warning of patient deterioration so nurses can take an intervention early that we know save lives and lower costs. The newest thing we've launched is fluid response, right? One of the things we're all worried about is sepsis, right? It's a top 2 killer in the hospital. It's a top 2 most expensive cost to the hospital, and it's about fluid management. Well, using our fluid response, you can push our button, push a bolus of fluid if you think that's what the patient needs, especially if they're a CHF patient or a heart failure patient, and we'll tell you empirically whether that patient is responding or not to the fluids. If you push too much fluid, you'll drown the patient in terms of the lungs. If you don't push enough, they're not going to get enough perfusion and volume. And more importantly, we document this so that you can get the SEP 1 reimbursement. The new SEP 1 value reimbursement is if you don't document, if a patient gets sepsis and you haven't documented the fluid response, you're going to miss out at $35,000, $40,000 of reimbursement. It's a really big deal to the hospitals. So that's all FDA cleared. We're in market now. We have nearly 200 customers using us every day. But what I'm even more excited about is our roadmap. Today, we measure, detect, and notify so that nurses can take action. All of our R&D, as you would expect me to say, is all about prediction. We get such a rich, continuous, beat-by-beat stream of data. We've got a huge data set that we can run our AI analytics on to do things like sepsis prediction scoring before it happens. Hypotension prediction, that's a drop in blood pressure, right? We always joke that hypertension, high blood pressure, that might kill you 10 years from now. Hypotension, a drop, it's going to kill you right now if there's not an intervention. Blood loss and hypovolemia detection, fall detection. These are all roadmap and shock state and roadmap items that we're working hard to launch later this year and next year. So how does it work? Very briefly, our patented pulse decomposition analysis uses a very low pressure finger sensor. Wear it for multiple days. If you think about it, every time your ventricle ejects blood into your aortic tree, there's a reflective wave that comes back up that aortic tree at every branch point. Where your iliacs, where your renals, there's a size mismatch. That reflective wave that comes back out to the finger is what we grab with our sensor, digitize that wave, and then all of the pulse decomposition analysis algorithms tear that apart, and we're able to derive continuous beat-by-beat changes in central aortic pressure, cardiac output, systemic vascular resistance, and so forth. Now, you would say that's great, but only if it's accurate. Well, we have 14 published papers, over 16 clinical validations showing that relative to the gold standard A-line blood pressure, we track extremely well, especially in unstable patients. And in terms of cardiac output and stroke volume, relative to thermal dilution and the Swan-Ganz catheter, we also track very well, which is why we're one of the very few wire-free medical devices that has actually received FDA clearance because of our accuracy of PDA. Now, who needs this, right? Well, we see a world where this applies across the full care continuum of all points of care. This is put on by the EMT at the traffic accident, through the ambulance ride, ER, OR, recovery, and then hospital at home. But if we just focus on the big ones, right? If we focus on the ED and trauma, where there's 20 million admits coming out of the ED, and a third of those wait more than 2 hours to get a bed upstairs. Those are the at-risk patients where we can add value. In fact, we've got a customer in Virginia that is using this in their emergency room. This helped them with systemic vascular resistance and cardiac output identify an ectopic pregnancy hours before they otherwise would have found it. We're in the OR. We've got where 48 million inpatient, 34 million outpatient surgeries. Unless it's cardiac surgery, it's probably a spot check blood pressure and no cardiac output measurement at all going on in those surgeries. We can bring these insights that make better decisions for the anesthesiologists and the nurses. In fact, one of our customers in Arizona has declared that they've stopped using Swan-Ganz catheters even in their CABG, even in their heart surgery cases, and they rely on the vital stream to give them cardiac output and stroke volume. In the ICU, it's obvious, right? 2/3 of ICU patients still rely on blood pressure spot checks and no cardiac output and stroke volume, systemic vascular resistance at all. Strapping this on in a low-cost, easy-to-use form factor is a no-brainer and will improve care in those settings. Med-Surg, later this quarter, we're going to announce a partnership with a giant strategic specifically to take this into the Med-Surg applications, post-surgery patients during recovery that are not monitored. This is the patient population where all the bad things happen. Most deaths in hospitals happen in unmonitored beds outside the ICU. And then, of course, there's sepsis, right? The number one nemesis of all of us. And if you can just give an early indication of what's going on hemodynamically and help the clinician know how much fluid, how much is too much, how much is not enough, we will change the game in sepsis treatment. And we've got a growing list of customers, hospital and clinic customers that many of you will recognize using this every day in terms of validation. I'm really proud of my team. After leaving GE, this is actually my 5th startup, I'm happy to say. Been blessed to monetize all of them. My partner is the inventor whose life's work is pulse decomposition analysis. He comes to work every day advancing the technology, improving the algorithm set, building the AI. We've got a team of AI scientists now that are working on the next gen stuff. And our VP of sales comes from J&J Ethicon, someone who knows how to launch disruptive, high acuity devices into the market. We're here looking for growth capital. We've got investments already from 2 big strategics, Baxter and Philips, in terms of adding credibility. I mentioned the launch into the Med-Surg, and we've got a partnership with LCO Capital, which is specifically bringing funds to help our commercialization effort expand. So why VitalStream? It's about enabling patient mobility without sacrificing beat-by-beat continuous monitoring. It's about getting information quickly and early to the people who need it that can drive goal-directed therapy and other therapies before small issues become expensive, very big coding issues, and to drive nurse productivity and automate their workflow. Thank you very much.